All right, now let's jump into some practical stuff. I've told you just about everything I know about EQ. So, got all the head knowledge going on. Got a lot of good concepts, and you've got a good idea now of how you should approach EQ. And so now let's do some practical examples. And so first, let me just make it clear really quickly before we jump into this that this isn't meant to, understanding EQ isn't meant to be an exhaustive case study on how to EQ everything you're ever going to encounter. There's a part of me wanted to get everything I've ever recorded, every instrument, and pull it up here and say, this is how you EQ this. You boost here, you cut here, you use a roll off here, and you do this tweak here. And could have done that, and I think a lot of people would have liked that, and perhaps would have even sold a lot of copies of that. But I didn't want to do that, and here's why. The main reason is if I give you just a formula approach and tell you, give you a cheat sheet that you print out and put next to your computer that says, this is how you EQ this. When you have a piano, you cut at this particular frequency and you do a small boost at this frequency and it's going to sound amazing. A, that's not true. And B, that really only works in one particular scenario. I've never EQ'd an acoustic guitar the same way twice. There are certain things that I do, I usually do cut in a certain frequency range, but it's never the same exact frequency. And usually there's a lot of variables from one acoustic guitar track to another. So it just wouldn't be fair of me to give you a cheat sheet that said, this is how it's done. Thanks and have a good day. What I want to do is teach you a good approach to EQ so that when you encounter, no matter what you encounter, if you're recording a full orchestra or you've got tracks from a glockenspiel or you're recording a yodeler out in a canyon somewhere, you're going to know and you're going to have a lot of confidence as you approach those different challenging tracks. Are they going to be challenging? Absolutely. It's going to be hard. EQing things can be really difficult, but you're not going to be lost. You're going to have a good starting point, and you're going to go through the things we talked about, especially in the last video, and you're going to go through step by step, and you're going to know what your goal is, and you're going to do everything you can to achieve it. So rather than tell you how to do everything, I'm going to show you how I EQ a couple different things, a couple tracks from my album. I'm going to walk you through how I EQ those. And then rather than just taking what I do and doing it exactly, I want you to take the process that I use to get there and apply that to your recordings. So this video is designed to not be an exhaustive, cover everything you could ever want to EQ. This is much more meant to kind of whet your appetite, to give you an example of the things we've talked about in practice, real world examples, and hopefully get you excited to go pull up the session you've been working on and start EQing and start making it sound really, really good. So that's what this is all about. Secondly, I've realized I haven't shown you a bunch of the different EQs that you may encounter. Obviously, this is the one we've looked at a lot, which is the stock one that comes with DigiDesign with Pro Tools. That's pretty standard. If you know how to use this EQ, you can probably use most EQs. But there are several other ones out there. As far as ones that give you sort of a graphical interface, Waves has one called Q10, which looks like this. Yeah, it's kind of the same thing. There's more bands, but it's the same exact concept. You've got gain, which lets you boost or cut. You've got frequency, which lets you go left and right, and you got Q, which, like we said before, Q just gives you the width. And that's it. And you can turn this into a shelf or a high-pass filter, which that's kind of neat about this EQ. You can change each band and make it do certain things. So when I want to get real surgical, do a lot of things, when a particular piece of audio is being ornery, I'll use that. Other options here, there's the Renaissance EQ, which I use a lot, which this is, again, it's like the others. It's laid out a little differently here. This is where your boost and cut is. Here's your frequency. Here's your Q. Different sounding EQ. All these EQs sound differently, but they operate roughly the same way. This one has that option too to change a little bit of what each band does, which is nice. Now finally, one that I use a lot, and I chose not to use this on this video because a lot of you aren't going to have an EQ like this. And it's important to understand the basics of EQ without trying to confuse you by an interface that you may not be familiar with. I showed you an EQ like this in the first video. And this is from the SSL bundle from Waves. And this one, obviously, the first thing you'll notice is when I boost something, you don't see any change. There's no graphical output. And I personally, once I learned how to use EQ with those other plugins that visually showed it to me, I found that I started relying on the visual output. I had to see what was happening, and I ended up making all my EQ decisions based on what I saw rather than on what I heard, which is not good. So once you understand it, it's good to either just ignore that little screen on the EQ sometimes, or use an EQ like this where you've got to listen to everything. So if I'm going to do a cut, a cut at 15K and a low mid cut at 300 hertz and a boost in the low end, whatever, I've got to listen to all that and make sure it sounds right. And just to show you how these work, these are the filters. This is the high pass filter. This is the low pass filter. This is a high shelf, and this is the frequency. You can see it's measured in kilohertz. This is 1.5K up to 16K, and this is the booster cut. No Q here. These two middle ones do have a Q control, so there's boost and cut. Your frequency here is from 0.6K, which is actually 600 hertz, up to 7K, and this one gives you a Q control from narrow to really wide. Same here, and then the bottom is another shelf, which actually lets you be a bell if you want it to be, but there's no Q control, so it's a fixed width bell. Anyway, so you're going to have those, and these are fun because you have to listen. There's no excuse. You have to listen. I can't come in here and do that and think that's probably going to sound right. I really just have no idea until I listen, which is kind of fun. So those are the different types of EQs you'll encounter. There's a bunch out there. That's just a couple examples of what you may run into. Those are fairly popular examples as well. All right, so let's jump in. I've given you the intro. You know what to expect. And this is hopefully all designed to give you a good starting point so that you can come back to me in, sorry, that's the mic stand. You can come back to me in 3 weeks and say, man, I did the things you told me to do, and it really does sound better. That's what I want. I don't want you to say, I copied you exactly and it sounds better. I want you to say, man, I have a better understanding. My mixes are sounding better. I'm more confident with EQ. That's the goal. Okay, so this first song here is called Home. It's one of my favorite songs off my album, and it's just an acoustic vocal. This is a great place to start for anybody because it's simple and yet it's hard to EQ. And chances are, if you're a home studio guy, you're doing at least some simple guitar vocal demos, if not for your own music, then for somebody else. So here's what it sounds like.
Missing home, not sure where it is, all I know is
I forgot to mute the all of these guys. We'll get to those later. You heard some electric there. Back to these guys. Okay. So that's the track, and it sounds pretty good. It was fairly well recorded, but it's not perfect, obviously. Now, we're not going to get into compression. That's the subject of another video, another time. But today we're going to talk about how can we EQ this to get it to sound as good as possible. So as we listen, let's just listen again, and I'll tell you what I'm hearing.
missing home, not sure where it is, all I know.
I'm hearing it's very warm and very full. And if there was going to be drums and bass on this, then it would probably be too warm and full. But as it is right now, it's pretty good. But there's still some stuff we can do. So first things first, like we mentioned in the last video, what's our focus? Well, on a song like this, and especially with the way I'm singing it, especially
You are here.
at the chorus here.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for.
So it's a very vocal-centric song. The guitar is great, but the vocals are the focus. So let's focus on the vocals for a minute. Now, like I said, this is the one exception I would give you for soloing something. We want to get the vocal sounding like we want it to sound before we start adding other instruments. In this instance, the other instrument is just the guitar. So we're going to take a few minutes just to do that right now. Pull up an EQ, and let's just take a listen.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for a place to call.
Okay, so it's nice and warm. There's not a lot of highs, and what you notice is there's quite a bit of low end. If we boost down here, you'll hear there's a lot going on down here.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my.
Maybe not way down here, but more so. I thought it was down here, but turns out there's not a lot down there. But up here in like the 100 hertz, 150, there's a lot.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not.
Now that is the frequency range that can make it sound nice and warm. But it's also the frequency range that makes it sound muddy, that makes it rattle when you play it in your car because it's just too much there. So you got to tame that down. So let's just let's make this narrow and find exactly what the frequency is that's giving us those issues.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for a place to call. You are my home.
Yeah, right around here is where it feels kind of boomy. So we're going to do a cut here. And rather than doing a big dramatic cut like this, always do it, less is always more. You can always cut more in the future, but just a few dB, maybe 3. Increments of 3 is good, and make it a little wider. So then what we can do, and this is something I haven't shown you, but you've probably seen me do it, is we can bypass it. So we can turn it on and off by clicking on this button, or turn the entire EQ on and off if we have several things going on by just bypassing it here. You can bypass here, or you can hold down Command and click here to bypass, just so you know. Okay, so let's listen to that.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't.
Okay, so that's with the EQ. Suddenly it sounds a lot, it's still full, and it still sounds nice, but there's not quite as much of that boominess. So I'm going to play it without the EQ, so the original version, and then with the EQ, and I'll just switch back and forth so you can hear that.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for a place to call. This apartment isn't, this apartment isn't, this apartment isn't.
You'll notice it's subtle. There's just not quite as much of that sound, if that makes sense. And that doesn't add to what makes the voice sound good. It's just noise. Now what I do notice is there's still a little bit of noise going on down here. And what I'm guessing is if I just put a high pass filter over there, we'll just get rid of that. So down here, a voice, unless it's a really deep bass singer, usually on vocals you can get away with cutting a lot of this because it just doesn't need to be there. Like I said, I high pass everything but kick and bass.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for a place to call. You are my home.
Perfect. Now let's just see if there's any, it's a little nasally sounding. Let's just see if there's any frequencies up here that need to be addressed. If not, we'll leave it alone.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for a place to call. You are my home.
I don't really hear anything up there that's bothering me. The only thing is with the particular preamp that I use, there's not a lot of high end. I'd like it to sparkle a little bit. So this is one of the exceptions where I will use some high EQ, a boost in the high end. But what I'm going to try first is a little cut in the mids, just to see what that sounds like. So I'm just going to play it. Let's see what this does.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for a place to call. You are my home. This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home.
Okay, this is really cool. This is something I was trying to show you in one of the previous videos about how cutting it can essentially do what you wanted to do with a boost. So instead of coming over here and yanking up this high boost, because I wanted some highs, I decided to try to just do a nice wide cut across the vocal. It's already cut here. Do another nice, just gentle cut here, and you'll notice when I brought it way down here, it sounds like I boosted the highs.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't.
It's all bright and shiny. I didn't have to boost anything. But obviously that's way too much. But I noticed when I came back up here and boosted it to listen, it is kind of that annoying part of the voice. My voice has this kind of, it's a fairly nasal voice in stylistically the way that I sing. And a lot of times that comes across as some nasal noise and just a little annoying. And that's what these frequencies do. So by boosting, we can hear that.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my.
You can just kind of hear my nose, for lack of a better term. So we're going to take that and cut it just a nice wide cut. And suddenly the voice sounds even cleaner. It's still full in the low end. It's not like the low end went away. There's plenty of information there. We just turned it down a little bit and turned this down a little bit. So now the highs, it's a nice smooth transition up to the high end. So let's listen to that.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for a place to call. You are my home.
So I ended up just cutting it by maybe a dB because it down here sounded fairly thin.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't.
So up here, just a little cut there. It's a nice wide cut. So it's getting a lot of frequencies. And now the highs sound pretty good. We may come back later and boost the highs. And if we do, what I like to do is get a bell curve, make it nice and wide, and then just boost way up here by just a little bit. So it sounds like this.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for.
But right now, I don't think I need it. It tends to cause problems because it boosts the S's in my voice, which isn't good. Okay, so we got the voice sounding pretty good. This is kind of how we want it to sound.
Mississippi.
Go back to the chorus.
This apartment.
Okay, so we're going to bypass it. This is what it sounded like before.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home.
And this is after.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for.
So one more time, just so you get the point. I'm going to play it with no EQ and then with EQ. I'm not going to talk between them so you can hear the difference.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home.
So it sounds great. We can visually see what we did. We removed a little bit here, and we removed a lot of information here. The voice still sounds full, and it didn't sound bad before. That's the thing. We're not talking about something that didn't sound good. We're simply talking about it had a little too much low end and too much muddiness here that didn't make it sound full as much as it made it sound muddy. And so by just removing that a little bit, we've made it sound nice and full and clean. We can hear the vocal very nicely. So now let's add the guitar and see what we've got there.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for.
So the guitar, acoustic guitar and vocals are almost always going to be in kind of in a fight with each other because they do occupy almost the exact same frequency range. And so you've got to take care of that. So we noticed here that the vocal kind of sits in this range. A lot of the warmth of the vocal is down here around 150 hertz. And a lot of the extra tone of the vocal goes up to like 500, even up to 1K. That's a lot of where the vocals sit. So the guitar needs to chill out, especially in this area where the vocal's already full. And it can be a little lower, and it can be nice and high, but it needs to kind of get out of the way here. That's what we're talking about when we say carve out some space. So let's put an EQ over here on this guitar track. And let's listen. Now, you'll notice I'm not going to solo the guitar. We're going to just listen.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't.
Right off the bat, guitar doesn't need a lot of the low end stuff. It's acoustic guitar. It doesn't need the stuff below 60 hertz.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't.
And it's not the kind of thing you can even hear very much, but just rolling it off just gets it out of the way so you don't have to worry about it later. Okay, so now we're going to take this 150 hertz because this is probably, if I had to guess, if I boost right here, it's going to sound pretty awful. Really muddy.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my.
Okay, so what we're going to do is take that frequency and we're going to do a little cut here.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for a place to call. You are my home. Mississippi.
Okay, looks like right here, more closer to 100 hertz. excuse me, is where the real issue is happening. So we found that frequency here. Now we're going to cut it.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for a place to call. You are my home.
So we just brought it down until the vocal became the center again, is a good way to describe it. We brought it down until the guitar wasn't distracting from the vocal in that range. So from here,
this apartment isn't, this town,
the guitar's just kind of overpowering. Here,
this apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not.
there it sounds a lot better. Now you may think the guitar needs a little more low end. Well, rather than going and boosting or anything else, let's just adjust how wide we're cutting. We can go from here to here, and the guitar will have more low end down here, with this part still being cut. Let's listen to that.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for a place to call. You are my home. Mississippi.
Okay, so starting to sound pretty good. Now with the guitar, I usually am going to have to do more than just one EQ band because there's other things going on. Let's listen up here. It seems like there's just some stuff muddying up the vocals still.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for a place to call.
Just a lot of information around 250. As you can hear, if I widen it a little bit, there's a lot going on there.
This apartment isn't, this town.
And it's just causing things to sound kind of muffled and clutter, and kind of sounds cluttered. So we're going to do a nice wide cut here because it's going to ease those sounds there. There's too much of that frequency. We bring it down, it'll sound more like it fits a little better. So let's boost it here, and I'll let you listen to it as I cut it.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for a place to call.
Now we can come adjust this one because as you can see, it's overlapping here. Maybe we adjust this one to give it a little more frequencies here.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for a place to call. You are my.
Sounds pretty good. Let's listen to the before and after. I'm going to play it for you. The before with no EQ, and then the after.
This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for a place to call. You are my home. This apartment isn't, this town isn't, these streets are not my home. I'm looking for a place to call. You are my home.
So what did you notice there? Maybe go back and maybe rewind, stop the video, rewind it, and listen to that a couple times. If you've got some nicer headphones you can use, or your studio monitors, whatever the case may be, and listen to that a couple of times. I'll tell you what I noticed, but go ahead, stop the video now if you want before I tell you what I heard. Go back and listen a couple times, then come back to this point. Okay, now that you're back, what I hear is the guitar becomes less of a distraction. It still sounds good. It may not be quite as full, but we decided before that the focus needs to be the vocal. If we let the guitar be the focus, that's fine, but we have to go adjust how we EQ the vocal too. So the vocal is kind of the warmer part of the song. The guitar is supposed to support that. And so that's what I heard. I heard the guitar get out of the way. It wasn't a matter of it got quieter as much as it got less full and less distracting in those low mids, and it worked out well. And we ended up with this.
My home, this apartment isn't, this town isn't.
Now, is there more tweaking I can do on that? Sure. Yeah, I mean, this is just a quick EQ. But you can see how just a few moves like that, and you'll 98% of the time you're going to be EQing in this range. This is where all the frequencies build up. This is where all the vocals, guitars, bass, everything has a lot of information here. So you're going to do a lot of cutting here. You may do some up here at times, maybe up here, down here, but here is where I spend a lot of time EQing. So let's move on to something different. This is a vocal piano song, and it's a lot of the same stuff. So I just wanted to show this briefly. We're not going to spend as much time on this one, but I'm going to return all these back to their beginning spots by option clicking on them. Get rid of that high pass. Do the same here. And let's listen to the track just briefly, figure out what we want to do.
But I'm coming quickly. I'm coming quickly. I'm coming quickly for you.
Okay, let's do it backwards. Let's say we want the piano to be the focus. In this song, I actually want the vocals to be the focus. But for an example, let's make the piano. So let's listen to that and figure out what we're going to do. Now, upon initial listen to this, there's a lot more in like the higher mids that bothers me. So let's find the frequencies that are bugging me. Yeah, right in there. Those notes ring out more than everything else. So I'm gonna do a fairly wide cut here and make those behave themselves. So let's listen to it as I cut it. Okay, that sounds pretty good. And then let's just see if there's anything in the low mids we need to take care of. Okay, and that sounds a lot better to me. It's less cluttered in the mids now. Let's take a before and after listen. It's just a little more tame. And so now we can add the vocals in.
But I'm coming quickly.
Initially, I think there's too much low end, so we're going to roll that off and find the low end and just do a nice cut there.
But I'm coming quickly. I'm coming quickly.
Much better. Listen to the before and after.
But I'm coming quickly. I'm coming quickly. I'm coming quickly.
Just more under control on the low end. And really, this is all I'm going to do with this vocal because it sounds pretty good. Again, you don't have to do a bunch when you're EQing. The one thing I may look at is the sound of like the consonants when I sing is a little pronounced. We may find those and try to cut those a little bit.
But I'm coming quickly. I'm coming quickly. I'm coming quickly.
Yeah, right there. We'll just do a little cut there.
But I'm coming quickly. I'm coming quickly.
Just makes that k when I sing the word coming, makes it a little quieter. And that's really all I'm going to do. Now, I'm just showing you this quickly. Obviously, we could spend 30 minutes doing this if we wanted to, but we're not. I just wanted to show you that the whole idea is we find the offending frequency, we boost, we find it, and then we cut it. Boost, find it, and cut it. We almost never have to do a boost as the final result of an EQ. So that's the takeaway point. Now, I was going to leave it with just those two examples, but I want to give you drums and bass and guitars just quickly to kind of see how I would walk through that. So here we've got we've got a bunch of drums. This is actually from the song we were listening to in the earlier videos. And we can't hear it. There we go. So they sound pretty good. Well, there are different things you can do. For example, the kick drum. Almost on all drums, I'm going to take an EQ and I'm going to get rid of 400 hertz. That's one of the little rules that I will do. So I'll find 400 hertz on this kick drum. Listen to what it sounds like. You hear how much deeper it sounds by just removing that? That just makes it sound less boxy. That's one rule that I have. So I'll do that on kick drum, and sometimes I'll do that on snare. I'm going to copy that over to the snare, and that's going to make life a lot easier just with those two tweaks. And again, these don't sound bad. With drums, I'll usually start with the overheads. Now, I like to have the kick drum handle the low end, like I've said a million times, so we're going to pull on a high-pass filter and get rid of a lot of that. Might sound a little thin to you, but what it's actually doing is it's going to handle the crashes and kind of the overall sound of the kit, and then let the kick drum handle the rest. Listen to the difference when I bypass this. When we're listening to the entire kit, when I have this EQ on there and when I don't. This is without. Listen to the kick drum. It's going to sound so much more pronounced just by removing the low end from the overheads. It's just the kick drum, it's not as roomy sounding as it was before, and it's got a nice solid sound to it, which is great. And so it's just a matter of doing those little things. Pull up a snare drum, and we'll just solo it just for an example. But so we decide to cut that frequency. It doesn't matter. Just find a frequency you like. The snare drum's kind of cool. Find one you like or one you don't like and cut it. And there's one example where I'll do a little boost. I remove this frequency. I want this one to be louder. Compression might have helped, but I'm just going to boost it. And that sounds pretty good. Whereas before, it sounded kind of wimpy. Now it has some meat to it. It just hits really hard. It sounds great. So there is a great example of when I do sometimes boost. What did I do first? I cut twice before I boosted. I cut the lows out, and then I cut these higher frequencies that sounded kind of snappy and girly, and then boosted some of the meat down here at 150 or 170, whatever that was, and got it sounding kind of nice and kind of great. And it's not a super difficult thing if you know the right approach. So obviously I know a snare drum. Maybe I know a snare drum better than you know a snare drum. That's fine. There's no problem with that. Just keep in mind that the more you do it and the more you take the same approach to everything, it's going to be a lot better. So I know that, for example, I told you the 400 hertz thing. Kick drum and toms especially it works well on. For snare, sometimes, maybe not. We did end up cutting around 400 hertz here, but then we boosted a little bit here to give it some more meat. If it was a different snare, we might not have done that. But I knew to come in and listen to frequencies and remove the ones I didn't want. And actually here, what I did is I found that this frequency sounded pretty good. But rather than boosting that, I tried to cut up here to give it some room. And that made it sound a little better, and then I boosted it just a little bit. Rather than if I hadn't cut over here and I just boosted it like that, that would have been probably too much and would have caused problems down the road. Especially if we started trying to compress it and do all those other things. It gets kind of crazy. So that's just kind of a simple showing you what the drums can do. Let's bring bass into the picture. I'm always cutting with bass. Everybody likes to grab the low end and boost it on bass. I'm telling you, don't do it. You'll be glad you did. So instead of grabbing this and boosting like that, you can make your bass have lots of character and sound real manly without having to do that. First, come in and find that low mid. The bass is going to have a frequency in this range that's going to give you all sorts of problems. You need to get rid of it. Like I said, the vocals and the guitars hang out here. Bass hangs out down here. So anything that the bass is spitting out here, you need to get rid of because that's going to muddy up your mix really quick. So let's boost here and take a listen. Let's find where the offending frequency is. Right there, 150, almost on the dot. It's just too woofy. So what we're going to do a big cut. So let's listen to the before and after. This is without. This is with. Okay, rolled off some of the high end, moved this around to where it sounded better, moved it down lower and ended up sounding better. So let's listen to that. Now let's do the before and after. I'm going to play you the dry bass and then the EQ'd bass. You notice the un-EQ'd bass just is so overwhelming. It's just so woofy. And the EQ'd bass has a little more control. Now, to be honest with you, I'd probably do a little more of a cut and a wider cut. Something like that might work better. Sounds pretty good to me. And again, you'll notice I didn't boost the low end. I got rid of those low mids, so now the low end can come through. Here's the electrics. Let's start with the rhythm guitar. We'll move over a little bit in the song to where it comes in. First thing I notice is it's kind of competing with the electric. I'm sorry, it's competing with the bass. If we listen, it's got a lot of low-end information. And that's going to definitely compete with the vocals later on too. I already know that. So let's just roll off some of the low end here. And then let's do a nice wide cut here. Just tell it to lay off the bass a little bit. Don't need you here. That's a big example there. Soloed by itself, it sounds great. But then you add the bass and it sounds muddy. Something doesn't sound right. So by EQing it and by removing some of this low end, you still hear the tone of the guitar, but it doesn't step on the bass as much. It's great stuff. Now with the other guitar part, which we can hear if we come back to this part. This guitar part's supposed to be just kind of high and jangly. Not supposed to have any low end. He's not playing anything with the low end, so we're going to get rid of the low end to save room for the kick drum and the bass. We're going to do this. One trick I would suggest you do, if you're not sure where to use your high-pass filter, just start playing it and roll it up till it's too far, and then dial it back. Okay, that's too far. That's great. So just like that, over the course of, 25 minutes, we were able to do a basic EQ of a drum kit. We didn't touch the toms, I know. We did the overheads, kick, snare, bass, 2 electrics. And it was all a matter of cutting. We did one boost that whole time, and it's starting to sound pretty good. So hopefully, over the course of all of this, you've gotten a good understanding. If you haven't, go back and watch these again and take some notes. I'm giving you ideas for how to go into this and to approach any mix that you do with confidence that you're going to use EQ to make it sound better. Now, are you going to be perfect at it the first time? No. I'm not making any promises that I'm going to make you an awesome mix engineer just from watching these videos. But you are going to have a better understanding. That's why this is called Understanding EQ. Hopefully, you've got a great understanding of how it works and some good ideas of how to apply that to your workflow and to your mixes, and things are going to start sounding better. You've got to practice, you've got to put in the work, you got to spend the time. It's just like playing guitar. You can understand how guitar works and what chords you're supposed to play, but you just got to get in the habit of playing them and getting better and better at it. So thank you again for being a part of this. I hope you've gotten a ton of value out of this and that your mixes are already starting to sound better, and I certainly appreciate it. So we'll see you around soon.